You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, and with us, as always, is our producer, Chelsea Steer. Chelsea, welcome to season 14.
Sarah, I think it's important that we kick off this season. I want to talk directly to our viewers for a second. So we have some big goals here on the podcast, and you've probably heard me talk about this before, but that is for this show to reach 1 million food founders. And we have a long way to get there to that 1 million food founders, but it starts here on YouTube by reaching 500 subscribers to this channel. Subscribing, which you can do right below, is the number one way that you can help us get in front of other founders and reach that big goal. Okay, Sarah, so you got to have some fun last week.
I did.
We are going to be kicking off season 14 with an episode where you're kind of recapping some of the exciting things and takeaways and conversations that you got to have, number one, at Expo West. But I know that you also want to spend some time today talking about your experience as well at the Intense Conference.
Yeah. So March 5th, I think it was March 5th and 6th, I was at Expo West for 2 days. And then the following Monday, I was in San Diego at the Intense Conference, and we recorded the episode we're airing today, sort of the Friday after I got back from Expo West. Everything was really fresh. I felt it was important to have a conversation about it because, as I shared publicly, on social media, I had not been to Expo West in over a decade. I was choosing to go for the first time. I wanted to talk about the why. I wanted to talk about what my goals were and sort of part of my experience in being there.
Yeah.
I had not yet gone to the Intense Conference at the time that we recorded the episode. And coming back from San Diego, I was like, what an interesting juxtaposition. Kat Fields White and her daughter Bridget and the team at Farmers Market Pros have been putting on this conference annually for a very long time. I have attended, this is my third time, but I think, I've been like sort of part of that world sort of for the last 5 years. And I know that it's been going on, much longer than that. It is my favorite place to go annually. And I mean that wholeheartedly. It is a conference specifically designed for farmers market managers and farmers market vendors. So you have farmers, you have CPG, brands there that are selling locally and regionally via farmers markets. And you've got folks that just want to support regional food systems at this conference as well. And there was a really interesting social media post that one of the attendees made shortly after the conference ended, which I think is interesting to talk about. Right now in the world of social media and very fancy grocery stores is a $19 strawberry at Erewhon. And it's fascinating to me and to many people in this space that there's so much buzz and hype around a $19 single strawberry from Japan that is wrapped in, plastic, right? And obviously took a lot to get to the United States and et cetera, right? I don't need to go into all of those details. Yet there's issue with spending money on produce that's grown locally and regionally. There's, you know what I mean? So it's an interesting way to frame the experiences of what I'll call big CPG at Expo West and the work that the folks are doing at the Intense Conference, both the organizers and the individuals who attend each year. You've got a group of people in San Diego who are fighting for food access, who are fighting for the farmers and the small businesses, who want people, they talked about protein bucks as a new way to help people in the community who don't have the funds to get protein from the farmers market. We're talking to Benny Blanco Tortillas founder Christopher Hudson later this season. He was in San Diego with us. He talks about his porcupine project, which is a secret word, that allows people who don't have the financial means to get access to his high quality tortillas, right? Like to see that, to see all of the hard work, to see the roadblocks that these folks and farmers are running up against with USDA funding getting pulled, the number of people that were unable to attend that conference because they no longer had jobs because their USDA funding and grants were gone was astonishing. Like stunning, And then to have just come from Expo West where, I said to someone, that's all inner aisle. None of that is necessary, right? Farmers markets are so necessary. Expo West brings some innovation, clean, healthy products, alternatives to what the big corporations are creating and selling, in the middle of the grocery store. So there's value to it. But the hype and the hoopla and the money and everything that is happening there and the lack of that at a conference like the Intense conference where it's just really staggering to me. And I think I need to say this out loud. I need that to be a part of this conversation as we head into an episode where we're debriefing Expo West. It just feels really, really important. And every year the Intense conference solidifies my belief in the need for and the value of local and regional food systems and local and regional economies. And I want to thank Kat and her entire team for consistently putting this event together despite the challenges that the farmers market community as a whole is facing and that they are facing individually, to continue to excite us, to invigorate us, to remind us. And as other, attendees of the conference told me over lunch, it's a hard job. It's an exhausting job, but coming to this conference really gives the motivation to go back to work and to keep on fighting. And so thank you, Kat, and the entire Farmers Market Pros team for everything that you do.
I love that. That does feel very big, very important. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking, and when you talk about the hype and the excitement and the money being spent on promoting and selling the brands that do sell in the middle aisles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking about a grocery store and on the outside, edges of the store, there's not a lot of oh, which brand of apple am I going to buy? Or but that's one of the amazing things about going to a farmer's market, in my opinion. And especially, actually, a little insider information is going to a farmer's market with you, Sarah, because that's where I get the oh, we need to go to this farm. They have the best oranges. Then we need to go to this stand. They have the most delicious strawberries. I mean, you introduced me to my absolute favorite strawberry. And I'll tell you right now, a pint of those strawberries still costs less than the $19 single strawberry.
Well, you bring up a good point too, Chelsea, if I might interject.
Yeah.
At grocery store, produce and outer aisle stuff is more expensive than inner aisle. But if you go to a farmer's market, that's not the case. And oh, by the way, you are getting, and this I'm repeating from the woman who made the post about the strawberry, and I will share that on social media around the time that this episode airs. It has not traveled. It was picked within 24 hours or just a few days, from when you're receiving it. It will last in your refrigerator so much longer. I applaud the brands that are working to create better versions, right? Good food versions, clean versions of the stuff that's happening in the middle aisle. But we really, really, really need to be supporting our farmers and our local vendors.
Yeah, But Sarah, I think we both agree that that's not to take away from your experience at Expo West and at that conference. I think that you got to meet a lot of people that you've worked with for a long time in real life for the first time. So that's really exciting. And you got to meet a lot of people that you've wanted to meet for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And talk to some founders and also what I call like support partners,
Yeah.
right, in the industry. And you had a lot of really good takeaways.
I did. I think, yeah, my experience at Expo West was positive overall. The mission was community and
Yeah.
meeting community in real life. And I'll talk about that more in the main episode. But yeah, both things are important, right? Both things are important. And we talk about building a business on your own terms in whichever sort of path you choose. The end goal is better food for all.
Yeah.
And I think, we can approach it whichever way feels right for us. It's part of being a Baba Yacht. And so yeah, it was a really good experience. I'm glad they both happened within a week of one another. That feels magical to me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, let's head to the main episode and share some of my takeaways from Expo West this year. Ready to take control of your finances? Want guidance tailored to the specific goals you have for your business and a supportive environment to build your financial confidence? Join me in our CFO office hours. You'll get expert financial support at a fraction of the cost of hiring a consultant. Each session, I'll help you tackle your specific challenges and opportunities, break through roadblocks, and build confidence in your path to profitability. Visit thegoodfoodcfo.com and click on coaching to learn more and reserve your spot in our next session.
Sarah, you spent this week, so we're recording at the beginning of March for anyone wondering, right? You got to spend this week, a couple of days at Expo West.
Yes, I did.
And first off, the very first, question I have or thing I want to talk about, maybe for those that are listening, I do realize that most people are familiar with what Expo West is, but for anybody who may not be familiar or have a full understanding of what this show is or is like, can you maybe fill us in a little bit there?
Yeah, I don't have a specific statistic, but I'm going to say that this is probably the largest like natural foods expo,
Mm,
in the industry, that there is. It is hugely attended. I would say thousands of brands are there, distributors are there, and this is a place where, once a year, buyers, distributors, they all kind of ascend on Anaheim, California, and get to meet brand founders, get to taste products. And it's very interesting to see how the expo is set up. There are different rooms in different areas around the convention center where you've got like hot, new brands, hot products, I think they called it. And then, there was another area where they're still sort of like emerging and like new products, but they're a bit more established. Then you've got
mm.
another space where you've got not just food, but supplements and other consumer packaged goods products. And the booth sizes range from like a table with a banner behind them to, in some areas of the convention center, just massive, 4 square booths with, lounge areas and big signage. And it's just, it's kind of wild to see. And it's thousands of people all walking around very tightly in these rooms, tasting food and getting to know people and networking. It is a massive networking event. Everything from happy hours to, brunches to bowling events to like you name it, it's happening. And then there are educational tracks, pitching events and other things kind of going on, all around the exhibiting area as well. Does that give you a good picture of
Yeah,
what it's like?
definitely. Definitely paints a picture in my head. And I think, where my mind is at is I've heard you talk about this before. You actually have not attended Expo West in over a decade.
Yeah.
So since you had your own food business.
Yeah.
And I think many will wonder what was it about this year? Why this year did you decide to go back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I decided to go back this year for a couple different reasons. Number one, from a marketing sort of like an outreach standpoint, I thought this is a great year to start to spread the word to more folks about our podcast. So there was sort of like that as a goal, but more importantly, we have community members and clients who were attending Expo either as exhibitors or just to be there to experience it. You know, they call it like walking the show. And so I wanted to connect with them. I've known some of these folks for 2, 3, 4 years. We've only seen each other over Zoom. And the number of them that were going to be there this year kept sort of ticking upward and upward. And it reached a point where I was like, okay, it's feeling like it's going to be worth it to go, worth it to leave the office, to not do my, typical work for a day or two, to go and see these folks, because it really means something to me to meet people in person. And then on top of that, there were some ladies coming from New York and Austin and San Francisco and Chicago and Minneapolis that, again, they're in my network. They are branding experts, trademarking experts, retail experts. I've not met these women in person, and some networking events started to come together. And I just thought this is an opportunity to really build community in real life. And community is so important for so many reasons. It was like all the energy felt right. And it felt like, okay, this can be worthwhile for so many reasons that it feels
Yeah.
like it's the right year to attend. And so those were the primary reasons that I went this year.
I love that. I love the idea of building that, kind of IRL community,
Yeah.
right? Because that's a lot of what we do and what we talk about is building community, but to be able to do that in person, face to face, that just sounds really amazing. Were,
Yeah.
were there any were there any particular events that you got to attend or kind of networking you got to do that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a lot. So I'll kind of give people a sense of what my schedule looked like, right? So you can like the expo runs from like Tuesday to Friday. So Tuesday for exhibitors, the setup day. They've got 2 full days of exhibiting on Wednesday and Thursday, and then I think it's like a half day on Friday. But there are events Tuesday through Friday going on. I decided to go on Wednesday and Thursday because I had client work to do on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I went, like, for example, on Wednesday, I left my house around 12:30. I'm an hour away from Anaheim. So I had meetings in the morning, tried to take my time getting ready, and then got down there, just to kind of walk the floor. And I was attending a startup CPG event in the evening because one of our community members, Rachel, who's the co-founder of Sprinkle Bites, was going to be there.
Mhm.
And she was one of the folks on my list that I really wanted to meet in person because we've collaborated so much online. So I was there for maybe 5 or 6 hours on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, similarly, had some things to do in the morning. A friend who lives here in LA was coming with me for the day. She's also in the industry, and we drove down together. And that day I was seeing one of my clients who was only exhibiting from like 9 to 12. So I had a small window to see him. And then there was the It's All Happening and Bread and Butter happy hour that I really
Mm.
wanted to attend. So that's where a lot of the women who are in our network were coming together for sure. And I wanted to be there. So I spent probably another 4 or 5 hours there and got to attend also a networking event for FAIR and the Good Food Foundation. Love the Good Food Foundation. They're going through a transitional sort of period right now. And so wanted to show up and support them as well. So what I was going for, again, specifically was like to see clients, to see community members exhibiting. So those were my sort of starting points. I had a networking event on Thursday. And what was really fun was there's another contact here in LA who I've never met in person. Her name is Jessica. She's the founder of the Y Collective. I texted her when I showed up and I said, "Hey, where are you?" Like, I was going to use her as sort of like a starting point, right? Like, I'll meet you and then we'll sort of go from there. And she said, "I'm headed to the Mazah booth." Mazah does like lentil hummuses and sauces. They're delicious. Their booth was beautiful. So I met her there, and I didn't know I was attending a happy hour at the booth. And so I ran into a number of people that I kind of had on a wish list that I would have liked to have met. And I met them there. And so that was really exciting too. And then I just walked the floor after that just to experience it. And, as a consumer of good food, there are 2 particular areas where there's a lot of good food, a lot of sustainable food, regenerative food, and I was excited to taste it and eat it, and also, you know, find some potential founders who could be a good fit to come on the podcast and talk about their journeys so far in the business. So
I
that was really
love that.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love hearing all of this kind of good stuff, right, that you got out of these last few days. But also, or on the other side of that, you know, I know that you've publicly shared before. I mean, you've shared on Instagram, right? That you actually have mixed feelings about Expo West and about the show, and hoping you can kind of shed some light or like help me to understand that what is that mixed part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, the last time I was at the show was like over a decade ago. That was when I had my food business, and the way that the show was sort of pitched was like, you know, natural like foods and, you know, product expo. And so we had attended that show thinking, oh, maybe we can find products that we can share
Mm,
here. And I was surprised at that point in time how processed things were, and just sort of like what the products were and how big the brands were at the time, you know, that were there. And I was just like, oh, bummer. This is not what I thought it was. And so I sort of had that kind of initial experience, like, oh, this is a lot bigger than what I thought it was going to be.
mhm.
And then in more recent years, you know, as a financial consultant, there's a lot of conversation around how expensive this show is. There have been a lot of there's a lot of hype around this show as like the place to be, and like a need to be place, you know, and it's not for every brand. It's for people who have a specific like direction that they want to grow and a goal, and that are at a certain point in their, you know, growth plan where they need distribution and different things, right? And last year I attended on the periphery. And so I didn't walk the show, as they say, but I
Mm,
met clients for dinner and stuff, sort of like in Anaheim, right? And like kind of just at the expo, but I didn't go inside. I didn't buy a ticket. And the overwhelming sense I got last year from looking at the lineup and the sponsored events and the different things was that there's a lot of talk about selling your product, getting sales, getting connected to buyers, but there's not a lot of context around who is ready for this and when is the right time to do it. And I last year was quite frankly very frustrated, feeling like there are so many people who make money off of founders by giving them guidance that isn't right for them and where
yeah.
they are. And I battled with that a little bit. And I talked to, you know, others in the industry saying like, you know, questioning, is it their responsibility to do it? And then the
Mm,
answer is like, maybe not. Right. But where I land on things is that I want to be someone who is trusted and that does add context to decisions that brands are making, and I cannot hold other people accountable for doing that. But I can do it, right? And I can collaborate with other service providers in this industry who do the same. And so
yeah.
sort of heading into this year, that was where I had landed. And so it was like, okay, how can I serve our community, like those who listen to this podcast and beyond, and just continue to help the industry move in the direction we want to see it going. So there was an evolution for me of like, you know, the pendulum swung like, oh, this is such a frustrating and bad place that's not looking out for the well-being of founders and brands. But then it was like, well, they can't be held responsible for that. Sort of that's when the pendulum started to swing. Who can be, and where do I fit into this, and who do we want to be as a, you know, as the good food CFO, and really sort of landed in a place where I felt like, okay, I can attend the expo and I can show up in a way that makes me feel really proud and that is helpful. And so, you know, all of those things are true. And I still, there are levels of frustration, but like nothing is going to be perfect. And you can't, in my opinion, avoid something that you don't totally agree with. You have to show up and do the right thing within it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And that's not with a lot of judgment necessarily, but it's like it's the truth of what I've observed and how I feel about it.
Yeah. And I also think, based on what you're sharing and saying, is I think that you've also come to a place of like both things can be true,
Yes.
right? Where, yes, that can happen. Yes, there are people that are doing these things, but you can show up in a way that is honest and transparent and says, hey, this can be great for you if X, Y, and Z. But
Yeah.
if you don't have these things in place, or if you're not at this point in your business, like it's not the right place for you to be. Like, I think that that's totally reasonable
Yeah.
um to be and to share with people.
Yeah, and if I might, I'll share an example. We were at like a happy hour event and it was on the floor, which is so cool. So you're just kind of like creating a storm, of people around a booth and just kind of networking and talking. And I was introduced to a founder who was, and I'll share. I think so. Startup CPG, I think, is a huge celebrator of brands, and they help get the word out. They are great connectors of brands to buyers and things, right? But they are not in the space of like identifying if a brand is right for it, right? Like that's on the brand. And I met a founder who had seen an opportunity to pitch to a particular retailer that was made available through Startup CPG, which is awesome. But they weren't ready and they didn't know that they weren't ready. And now they're realizing, oh gosh, I got picked. Like I got this opportunity. They said, yes, we want to talk to you, which is very exciting and validating for the product, right? But they're still buying their ingredients on Amazon. They don't know what their true cost of goods sold will be. They don't have a distribution plan. Like they're just simply not ready. But now they're realizing that. So it's okay, right? Like the advice myself and another provider in the industry gave to them was take the meeting, learn, but just don't agree to anything. Don't move forward. Like it's okay to do this and then just say, this is amazing. Now is not the right time. But as soon as we like it is, we'll reach back out, right? If it would be
Yeah.
a good fit. But what that solidified for me was like everyone is needed in the industry. And I can kind of like expand on what I mean by that. I don't connect brands to buyers. Startup CPG does a great job of that. How can I be supportive of the work that they're doing? Well, that's helping those same founders understand, do I have everything in order? Do I have a financially viable business? What are the steps that I should be taking to be prepared for this pitch or to be ready for this pitch, right? And so we can be collaborative in that way. And so, yeah, that's just kind of to like round out the idea of like founders often don't know what they don't know and they're very excited to sell. Selling is exciting, right? And sometimes you just need a little bit of help and support. And so connecting with other service providers, to identify those founders who need that extra support and making sure that we're getting them in touch with one another is extremely important. And that happened so many times at
Mm,
Expo West that I had moments where I was like, it was very much like positive reinforcement of like, it's not just good that I'm here to meet all the people that I wanted to meet. I'm also meeting founders and having a tiny impact, potentially big impact on them and their business simply by meeting them for a few minutes, which is very
yeah.
exciting and it feels really good.
I love that. I definitely love that. And I've heard you say a few times in this conversation now, right? Talking about brands that do decide to attend, right? That they should have a plan, that they should
Mhm.
have goals. And I'd love for you to expand on that like a little bit in what those plans or goals should or can look like
Yeah.
for a brand.
That's a great question. So obviously the breadth of like what those things might be are pretty big, right? But I'll give an example of Newish, who was here on the podcast, I think at the
Mm.
beginning of season 13, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah Nathan was there with a clear backpack that had yellow, like brand color, seams on it. And it was stacked with Newish soup inside. And so she was walking the floor. So she's not interested right now, to my knowledge, in going into distribution. She wasn't necessarily, maybe, and I don't know her exact plan, but like she didn't have a booth. She didn't like, for her, the ROI was not in investing in the booth because there mustn't have been enough to come from that. But for her, there was likely benefit in walking the floor, seeing what this show is all about, seeing what the different spaces are that I mentioned. What's the difference between hot products and, the North room? I don't even know what the name of that room was, but there were other sort of more emerging brands, smaller brands there as well. What room do I want to be in? What is the schedule like around the exhibit hall? What might I want to attend? So I think for a lot of founders who are early stage or who don't know if Expo West is right for them, attending for a day or two and walking the show with your product can be a really great experience, because then you get to know the show. You get to know, where do I fit in here? What makes sense, right? I think when you're ready to, when you're exhibiting, you're holding space for buyers to walk around and to meet you. And I think if you're ready for distribution, if you're ready for wholesale direct at a, sort of there are independent buyers who are there, but if you're ready for sort of beyond that, then you should have a booth, I would say. And, or you could have a booth and be prepared, like know who you want to talk to. Know who you want to stop by your booth. You probably should reach out to them before and let them know, hey, I'd love to see you at the show. This is my booth number, right? So you're not just showing up with a booth and being like, I hope the people I want to see
I'm here
are going to come around. On the flip side of that, though, Chelsea, there are certain brands that maybe they very strategically have one or two people that they want to get in contact with. You don't need a booth at Expo West to achieve that. Like, and I think that that's something that's really important for people to know. Like, if you're growing in such a way where you've identified, okay, this is my next target, or these are my next targets, and these are the people I want to reach out to, there are other ways to get in contact with them and to introduce your brand outside of Expo West. And I talked to a couple of brands, and I'll keep their names private, but for them, it was like, your brand has enough cachet. Your product has gotten publicity. The quality is good. Like to come to Expo West and invest in a booth for the very specific 1 to 2 people that you want to meet doesn't make sense, because if you reach out to them, they'll probably be very excited to have heard from you. And if that doesn't work, and then you feel like you need to have a booth, you know what I mean? Like, go from there. So it's very, very specific to, what you're doing.
Yeah.
And kind of, what you want to achieve. So those are some examples of like how you might attend, and sort of how to think through certain things.
I love that. And I love the explanation of the difference between like having a booth and just walking the floor. Because I heard you say that a couple times throughout the episode, and I was like, well, what does she mean walking the floor?
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And I love that story about Sarah Nathan.
I know, it was so cute. And there are lots of brands that do that. The other thing I'll say too is that it's not, so there are distributor buyers that are walking around. There's also grocery store buyers like walking around. So, I heard a lot of people talking about like, the Sprouts buyers are here, like for my category, or, you know what I mean? And kind of, again, knowing who you want to see, knowing if they're going to be at the show, different things like that. Are there other ways to get in front of those people that don't involve, Expo West, for example? But again, I think at the start of everything we do in our business, whether it's expos and exhibits, other trade shows, you name it, it's what is the vision and what is the plan for this year? What are we trying to achieve this year, and what are the steps that I take for that? And I hope the more we talk about this, like the more the FOMO around Expo West goes away. And I think that it has been over the last few years, and I will share this too. And I shared this with you kind of when we were doing our sort of initial download about how did Expo go. Like, I would go for 1 day next year, most likely.
Yeah.
Right. Because the amount you can get done in several hours is great. You can get a lot done. And I was able to sort of check a bunch of things off of my list really quickly by having I didn't have a plan. I didn't know that Mazan was having a happy hour, but had I known that, right, I kind of could have, my schedule could have been less intense, if you will, right? But so that's another thing that you kind of learn from going. And I was able to learn that with very minimal investment. And I should also clarify for anybody or everyone who's listening, like full transparency, we got a press pass. So the Good Food CFO has a press pass. And so we didn't pay for the ability to walk the floor.
Yeah.
That was something that was granted to us by Expo West, and I'm super grateful for that. And it's one of the reasons that we're talking about the show here and sharing about brands and bringing brands from the show, hopefully to the podcast, that I had great connections with that I wouldn't have learned about. And this is something I wanted to say earlier in the world of algorithms, right? In like how we connect with people, how we learn about new brands, how brands learn about us. It's difficult because algorithms, it's so tricky, right? So being out in the world and getting to meet people, there's just so much value in that. But again, like for me, I probably wouldn't have invested the thousands of dollars it would take to be on the floor, but to have the opportunity to have a press pass, to get on the floor, to meet people, and then to be able to amplify some stories and things from the show, like that's really amazing and was absolutely worth the time and the effort, to get there and be there and all of that.
Yeah. So after all is said and done, Sarah, we're sitting here on Friday. You've spent the last 2 days commuting down to Anaheim, walking the floor, enjoying your time, connecting with people. What are your takeaways? Like how do we wrap up this conversation? What did you learn?
Yeah. My biggest takeaway, honestly, is that what we're doing is important and valued. It's a bit of an ego boost, if I'm being really honest, but being recognized. And I was wearing a sweatshirt that said the Good Food CFO on it, our branded sweatshirt, but being recognized, like having someone call your name out and from their booth and say, "Oh my gosh, like it's so nice to meet you. I listen to your show every week. I love hearing you in Chelsea." That's wonderful, and Anna, who is a member of the show, and I hope that we can, highlight her brand here soon. She said, "I know that when you do a podcast, you're talking out like into a void, and it's hard to always know how you are like impacting and affecting people." And she was so kind to say, like, I listen every single week, and you're having a big impact on me and my business. Ali Ball, for example, she was like, "Sarah, I met a gentleman who's the founder of a brand who wants to meet you. I told him that you're going to be here, so this is where to find him." Like, it was so wonderful. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's true that it's true that we do talk to each other, right? And then we put the recording out into the world. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and there's data, right? But data doesn't tell you if you had an impact. So getting to meet people and hear that was really amazing. The other piece that was really amazing that feeds into the what we're doing is really important is being able to connect with people in real life where they're saying, "You need to meet Sarah. This is what they do at the Good Food CFO. They can help you with this." Meeting other service providers who are like, "We constantly have clients that need, financial support, and it's so great to be connected." So that was like a really, really huge takeaway was the value that we are providing and the sort of energy around what we're doing, and the fact that people are getting excited about having a place to learn about financials is really flipping cool. And
Yeah.
then also the other takeaway is that like our network is rad. And I really left thinking to myself, what more can I do for particularly these women in our community who were so gracious in introducing me, who were so gracious in saying, "Hey, you should attend this event." And, because more transparency, after not being there for a decade, I was a little bit anxious about everything from where will I park to, will I be able to find who I want to see to, networking on this scale for the first
To
time in I don't know how long.
also to it's raining outside.
Yes, in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. Yeah, got rained on, for 2 days in a row, drove in the rain, but like it's just like there's so much value in being with people, and I am actually like extremely grateful to Expo West for granting us the pass and to all of the folks that were there to network. to talk about what we're doing, to connect us to founders, to, support us. And we, likewise will be, continuing to support them, and to meet new people who are creating delicious food, really good food, mission driven businesses, who are like excited to talk,
Yeah. And I will say, when you talk about like meeting new people, these new mission driven businesses, for anyone listening, in our marketing meeting all morning, I got to enjoy watching Sarah eat all the different snacks that she brought home with her. So, yeah, I would say that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I'll say this too, because we talked about how there are some really big brands there. French Squirrel, that was one of the products I was eating this morning during our marketing meeting. Sydney was there. This was her second year. She has one of the most listened to, and I think one of the most impactful episodes that we've done in terms of a Baba Yacht episode. And when I walked up to her booth, because she was on my list of people that I wanted to see, I'd never met her in person. We both live in Los Angeles. She said, "Sarah, someone just walked away from the booth. She owns a macaroon company. And she told me that our episode together was so helpful for her and like really changed the way that she thinks about business." And so other people are getting that same kind of feedback, right, for coming on the show and sharing their stories. And something that Sydney said that I'll share here is like, she's like, "Oh, it just feels like kind of embarrassing. Like what I talked about on the show, it should have been 101 information." And I was like, do not be hard on yourself. You're sort of right that it should be 101, but it's not, because it's not what general business media is talking about, right? Growth at all costs is what is being celebrated and favored. And so, you're not alone in like believing what you were hearing, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, she's such an amazing example of someone seeing things in her numbers, saying, I need to make a change here. What can I do to fix this? And then making those changes, implementing them.
Yeah, not just riding the wave or hoping that it's going to work out. And I think that that's such an important point to make, right? That, yeah, sure, you could think of it that it should be 101, but it's not.
Yeah.
And there are reasons that it's not. And that's what we're here, trying to change.
Yeah. And I hope that this episode is not coming across like we're so great, but like,
but we are.
That's where, I mean, again, like my friend Shanti, who was with me, she's a culinary innovator who went to the show with me on Thursday. And when we were in the car driving back home, she was like, "How are you feeling after the show?" And I was like, my ego is glowing. Like it feels good to do a job that you believe in, that is truly providing value to people. So that is the wave that I am riding right now, of both like extreme gratitude and just this like very, very high level of joy for being a part of something that is bigger than me, which is so meaningful to me.
Yeah. And I think gratitude is the perfect word, right? I think, of course, you can talk about how you feel like your ego is shining and, we think we're awesome, quote unquote, right? But I think at the end of the day, it really is about gratitude, and the gratitude that we both, I think, share, right? In having the ability and the privilege to get on here every week and talk about these things and share, and hopefully, and it seems like you got to find out, impact people's lives.
Yeah. So thank you again to Expo West for giving us the opportunity to be in real life with so many amazing founders, to connect. And we're excited to bring many of them onto the show, to continue collaborating with the women specifically, because there are so many of them in our network, and those few gentlemen who were also around our ladies happy hours at Expo, who are also doing just really good work in helping founders to build brands in a sustainable way. I'm excited to connect with them too. So excited about the podcast that's going to be happening in the future, and all the new episodes we'll have coming out.
Yeah. So exciting. All right. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for sharing your stories with us, and welcome to season 14. We're kicking things off with a bunch of gratitude, and Thank you.
Thanks, Chels.
Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.